Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Welcome back, everyone, to the BuckeyeXtra football podcast preview edition for the national championship game. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Rob Oller and Bill Rabinowitz, and we made it to the finish line. It's we're recording this January 19th.
Wait a minute.
We're not there yet.
I don't. Well, we see the end in sight. The ticker tape.
I feel like the guy in that marathon, the famous one where he can't make it, and his dad has to run out of the stands and help him. I'm the Olympic guy. I'm just like crawling here to the finish.
Who's pulling who to the finish
I don't
line?
know, man. It's not.
Yeah,
good.
we're all look. And think about this. Think about how the players and especially
We're not complaining.
The coaches feel. I mean, the players are young, but their bodies have gone through hell playing a 16-game season, and the coaches are, some of them our age. I couldn't imagine putting in the hours that they're putting in. It's crazy. Now, they're rewarded well.
It's just football.
They're rewarded well.
We have to write.
Yeah,
And most listeners would say, well, most people don't like to write, right, listeners? Most people are like, oh, God, I hate writing. They'd rather coach. They'd rather sit in that meeting and just see X's and O's for like 8 hours and have to sit down and type. Right. I'm saying essentially we have it tougher than the coach.
Yeah, you say that. I'm not saying that. Okay. Obviously, Ohio State's playing Notre Dame for the national championship tomorrow. A month ago, this would have seemed pretty unlikely, given that they were coming off the Michigan loss at a game with Tennessee that a lot of people thought they could lose. They crushed Tennessee, crushed Oregon, survived Texas on the Jack Sawyer scoop and score. And
voted number 2 all-time play, by the way.
I saw that at
number 1 was, my Maurice Claret.
Yeah, I think you rigged it. I think you rigged the voting.
The Maurice Claret 0-2 title game, greatest play ever. Continue.
Yeah, the Sean Taylor play. Yeah. Anyway, so Ohio State's an 8.5-point favorite over Notre Dame. I like the matchup for Ohio State. I think it's a tough matchup for Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's here for a reason. They're going to give it all they got. It should be a competitive game.
Yeah, I feel like I thought Ohio State would win fairly easily, which is what I kind of thought against Texas. Self-inflicted wounds there, but regardless, they didn't win easily. I mean, the final score was not indicative of the final, of how it was played. And I kind of thought this would be the same, actually a little easier. I thought the Buckeyes would have an easier time against Notre Dame, but the more I've been down here just talking to people, is like, I would still pick Ohio State, but I think it could be a tough game. This could be a fourth quarter game for them. I think I've got it like 27-17 or 31-17 Ohio State. That seems like it's a pretty good cushion, but I'm not convinced that it's going to go that way.
I think if it's what's maybe revealing is if you look at the college football playoff final, that the title game in the playoff era, there hasn't been many close games. There have been 10 national title games in the playoff era. 7 out of the 10 have been multi-score games. There was a run of Alabama-Clemson games where it was a one-score game, and then Alabama-Georgia overtime was the last game that was decided by a single possession. So these have tended to be blowouts and routes. So if you are of the mind that Ohio State is going to manhandle Notre Dame, I think there's recent history that suggests that it's certainly possible, even though obviously these are two good teams who have gotten to that point, but that's tended to be how these games have gone.
I think if it is a blowout, I think Ohio State will be doing the blowing out. I think that
we tend to say that every time the game. We've said that.
It's true though.
It is, but it hasn't.
When's the last time Ohio State got blown out? Blown out.
Oh wow. I don't know, man.
Clemson 31-0 was a blowout.
Michigan in 22.
Michigan. Yeah, that was a blowout.
And 21.
Score-wise, that was a blowout.
Yeah, okay.
Multi-score losses.
Sure. But I think that, I said earlier that I think it's a good matchup for Ohio State because a couple reasons. One, Notre Dame's offensive line is beat up, and they have to run the ball. I'm not sure they can with a beat-up offensive line. They have to protect with a beat-up offensive line against a very good Ohio State defense. And on the other side of the ball, Notre Dame's got a very good defense, but they play man coverage. And good luck against Ohio State's receivers. If they can protect, if the line can protect Will Howard, and Will Howard doesn't make the mistakes he's made against Penn State and Michigan, then I think they should win fairly handily. But those are big ifs.
Yeah, I would agree. To me, I thought the key was protect Will Howard. I think if they do that, you give him time, that's going to give the receivers enough time to get open with man coverage. And now Notre Dame has pretty much shut down everyone they've played in terms of receivers and defensively in line. Well, yeah, was that out there? That's a tough one. But the other thing I was thinking is Ohio State. The last two games have not been blowouts. I mean, Ohio State against Notre Dame, right. And it's like I thought Ohio State should have won those fairly easily and didn't. So why am I thinking this one will be an easier time? I don't know. I think it's because Ohio State's defense is the difference. Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom's become just a dog. In a good way. Cody Simon, Sawyer, JT. I just think this defense is totally legit, and that's carried this team. I think mostly. I mean, we get caught up. This high flying trapeze act of the offense, and it can be very good, but the defense has just been there for all but
the Oregon game.
Game, essentially.
Yeah. And one of the reasons they gave up some points in that Oregon game was Oregon stole possession in the first half, and Ohio State fumbled at the doorstep of the goal line. Certainly, they gave up big plays, but since that game, the defense has been really good. They effectively shut out Oregon in the first half of the Rose Bowl. Texas had 2 touchdowns. Tennessee was really couldn't do all that much against them.
No, their quarterback. I mean, you guys tell me about the Notre Dame quarterback. I know a little bit about him. He's a pretty good runner, but is he like a tough runner or is he a slippery guy?
Both. Yeah, he can break away for some runs. He's got some speed, but he's also just a hard guy to tackle. Elusive, but also just a tough runner where he's hard to bring down. I mean, he's forced nearly as many missed tackles this year as Quinshon Judkins.
Wow.
So he is
reminds me of maybe a Penn State quarterbacks. They've had McSorley. Is he sort of a McSorley guy with a better McSorley?
He runs more than McSorley. He has almost 900 rushing yards this year. So a big part of what they do is they're going to run him with design runs.
He hasn't seen that, right?
And when plays break down, they haven't faced a quarterback who they are dead set on running. Dylan Gabriel was somebody who could maneuver the pocket and scramble, and they could use some replays with him. But nobody is committed to running with as much volume as Notre Dame commits to running with Riley Leonard. And
so that's an unknown a little bit for Ohio State, a little bit unknown of how they react to that.
But I like Ohio State's ability to stop him with Cody Simon, with Caleb Downs, especially Caleb Downs playing close to the line, as Joe, you've written about. I think they're well aware of it. And the problem for Notre Dame is they don't really have the consistent downfield passing game to keep Ohio State honest and keep them from crowding the line of scrimmage. And that's Riley Leonard is a very good runner because they asked him to be a very good runner. But Ohio State's defense is very good. The quarterback run plays that have hurt Ohio State have been the scramble plays, just the broken plays where Nico gets for Tennessee has done that.
Dylan Raiola did that in Nebraska, and that'll happen with Leonard.
But I don't think they have to. Look, I think Notre Dame's receivers are better than, say, Penn State's receivers. I mean, they're going to complete the pass to the wide receivers, unlike Penn State.
And tight end.
Well, Penn State's tight end's better.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyler Ward is as good as
yes, right.
So Notre Dame's got at least one good tight end. I just don't see how Notre Dame consistently moves the ball 80 yards down the field or whatever it might be. I think the key for them is to get turnovers, to make plays on special teams. They're very good on special teams, very creative. They've got to steal some possessions. They got to do that kind of stuff. If it's just a straight kind of man-on-man game, they're at a disadvantage.
They lead the nation in defensive touchdowns. They have 6 defensive touchdowns. They also lead the country in forced turnovers. They have 19 picks and 13 recovered fumbles, 32 takeaways on the year. So I think, as you said, they probably need to steal some positions. They lead the country in blocked field goals as well. So that, I think, the margins of this game is going to be important for Notre Dame. Rob, you wrote a little bit about Marcus Freeman having some trestle in him, and Notre Dame be wary of of trestle ball.
Exactly. It's control. How do you win the game? You control the game. You control the game by holding the football, keeping it away from the other team, and playing a stout defense and special teams. The punt's the most important play in football for Jim Tressel. We always joked about that. It was kind of true,
right?
So I think you're right. I think that's where Notre Dame has to do it. This has to be. I know this has been maybe talked about, but 2002 championship game, Miami was an 11.5-point favorite. What's Ohio State? 8.5?
Yep.
8.5-point favorite. It's a little bit of a reverse. I don't think it's not identical, of course.
Well, that Miami team was going for a back-to-back
They were going for
title.
back-to-back. They were coached by Larry Coker, who was not really thought of as a great coach, although the Marcus Freeman love is somewhat recent too, I think. I mean, I don't think anybody would have said Marcus Freeman the last 2 years was some brilliant coach.
Or after Northern Illinois.
Yeah, or after – exactly. So, he's getting a lot of love now because he's a personable guy, says the right things. But anyhow, back to the 0-2 game, that's Ohio State did it. They had a really good tailback in Maurice Claret and
very good defense.
Notre Dame has
Jeremiah
Love, maybe not equivalent. They had a very good defense. They had a kind of a cagey quarterback in Krenzel who could run, not like this kid can, but he was pretty good.
He ran when he had to.
And I think he had the most yards in the national championship game, like 86 yards or something. So there's some similarities between those 2 years and these types of teams. But that said, I would still expect, I think Joey and I said before we came on, if Ohio State plays what they're capable of and Notre Dame plays to their capability, Ohio State wins.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I mean, I think, like the last 2 years, Ohio State didn't have Caleb Downs. They didn't have Jeremiah Smith. 2 years ago in the opener in Columbus, I think people expected more than a 21-10 win. I think there was, at least offensively, I think there was the idea that C.J. Stroud's last year, they thought it'd be exploding. It kind of turned into a slugfest. And then last year, again, new quarterback with Kyle McCord. Ohio State had to drive at the very end, very fortunate to win that game. I think this Ohio State team on both sides of the ball is much more talented and playing better than that team was early last year, certainly.
Notre Dame does not beat itself. That's one thing.
One of the best in the country in turnover margins.
But Ohio State has not, even though, as great as they played in the playoff, no turnovers created in the first two games. And then, of course, the last two possessions, Sawyer's scoop and score was the first turnover they created, and then the game was essentially over at that point. Caleb Downs had an interception to finish the game. Those are the only two turnovers Ohio State's defense has created in the postseason.
They probably should have more turnovers based on how many balls they've deflected.
Right. They bat a lot of balls.
They've created a lot of havoc. They have not created a lot of turnovers, but the havoc rate suggests that those turnovers maybe should be coming.
Yeah. If I'm looking at it from the Notre Dame perspective, I wonder who's out. What receivers do they have that can stretch Ohio State's defense and make them respect the defense? You have the one kid, Greathouse, who's made some plays, so he's okay. But you think about Notre Dame's receivers versus Ohio State's receivers, and there's just no comparison.
Notre Dame needs to win in a very specific style of football where they need to somehow bait Ohio State into playing this Michigan-type game where they try to make it sort of a test of your manhood and play at the line of scrimmage. And maybe Ohio State could win that way because they have the defense to do it, and they're really tough, and I think they're going to be able to hold Notre Dame. But Ohio State could also win in a track meet because they have the playmakers on the perimeter and can make the game about speed on the outside. But the thing I just come back to, everybody's talked about Notre Dame being a man defense, and that could come back to bite them. They've run that previously under Marcus Freeman. They still held Marvin Harrison Jr. to 3 catches last year. So what they have done has worked against some Ohio State teams that have had good receivers. 21 points the Buckeyes scored 2 years ago. They had 17 last year. I mean, they have not put up a bunch of points against Marcus Freeman defenses and Al Golden.
I would say, really, I'm thinking the biggest problem for Ohio State is which Ohio State shows up.
Is it regular season Ohio State?
Exactly.
Or is it all?
Does the bounce they got from the Michigan loss, for lack of a better way to put it, does that continue? I mean, how long can it continue? If they're on a roll, are they still feeling it? You know, it was clunky against Texas, so it dropped off against Texas. The Tennessee Oregon thing on offense wasn't there. Why we keep coming back to defense? It's been solid. But I think if you're Notre Dame, you want something between the Texas game and the Michigan game. Like Ohio State, you want to. That's kind of like right in your window there. If you can get Ohio State into that zone, you got a shot.
And I think it's important for both teams. Fast starts are big. It'll set the tone. Well, Ohio State jumps ahead of them, say 14-0 early. Notre Dame's in a world of hurt. And if Notre Dame jumps ahead, then they can play the style they want. They can play ball control. They can make it a trestle game. And then it gets dicey for Ohio State.
I think it's harder for Notre Dame to play from behind, although to their credit, they did that in the Orange Bowl or against Penn State.
A very similar team.
Yeah.
Penn State. I don't think they can do that against. Look, Penn State did not complete a pass to a receiver. Think about that. A national semifinalist team did not complete a pass to a wide receiver. Ohio State will complete some passes.
You think so? You're going to go out
on that limb and say Ohio State will complete a pass to a wide receiver.
That was like when I went out on a limb last week and said Ohio State would score more points in this season's Cotton Bowl than last season's Cotton Bowl.
Well, you're such a risk. What a risk taker.
I could see that. I'm not predicting this, but I could see this being similar to the Alabama-Ohio State 2020 game. Because I think that Ohio State has the capability of just blowing them out. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying it could happen. Because if things go right for Ohio State, I think this is not as big a mismatch as that game was. Because I think Ohio State in that game was injuries and COVID, and Alabama being great made that almost, I don't say impossible for Ohio State to win.
Say the enduring image from that game is tough more than covering Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, which is not how you want to probably cover that guy.
And even in that game, it was close for late in the second quarter.
I had a feel, though.
Just wait for the dam to break. Wait for the dam to break.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I think could happen in this game. Notre Dame is going to play tough. They are who they are. They're a credible opponent. They've earned the right to be here. But I think at a certain point you reach this team's just better. And I think Ohio State is just better than Notre Dame. And they got to prove it, and lots of things could happen. But I could see, not for the score that 54-24, something like that. I'm not saying that, because I don't think Ohio State's going to score. If they get in the 30s, I think they'll be happy. But I could see it being, one of those deals where you watch, one team's just better than the other.
I would be surprised if Ohio State did not come out with an aggressive game plan, because you hear them talk about this now, but so much of what they did in the regular season in terms of slowing down the pace on offense was the preservation of the health of this team to get to this point. They are playing 16 games, which is a longer season than any team has played in Ohio State history. And to get to this point, you couldn't go full throttle during the regular season. And now they are, as we talked about, the finish line is in sight. They can speed it up. They can go tempo. There's nothing left to play for other than this game. Whatever they need to do to win the game, they can do that this game. So to me, it would suggest push the pace. Like you can go up tempo in this one.
I would agree. It's even as you say that, I think back now, though, and I scratch my head. Okay, it's a longer season. They know it. They're going to pace it and all that. And yet there were games where they had the game wrapped up, and they still had guys into the fourth quarter. It's like, wait a minute. What about this 16-game thing? Why do you have guys playing that late with the game no longer in doubt? Why are they on the field taking, it's a balance. I get it. You want them to get reps and all that. But that's why I'm always a little bit of like, okay,
A constant theme of this season has been in the press box when it's, Ohio State, whatever to whatever, and Rob saying to me, why is Howard still in the game? I can't believe they're leaving him in the game. I had lots of games this year where that's been a fourth.
I
didn't disagree with him.
Yeah,
not
even gets hurt.
And Howard gets.
Not even a fourth quarter thing. Sometimes Ohio State would take a 2-score lead in the second quarter, and Rob's trying to get guys pulled.
Well, you know what? I'm looking ahead. That's how much. That's how confident I was in Ohio State winning those games. I didn't think Western Michigan or Akron was going to get it done.
Yeah, you wanted to see Julian Sain play against Akron, probably.
Yeah, I think the fans probably want to. Some of the fans wanted to see him now. I'm sure that's the way the fan base is.
Well, Julian Sain plays this game. It'll either be really good news or really bad news.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct. And, we haven't talked about that's another X factor. Here we go again. Will Howard, he needs to play a good game. He doesn't need to play a great game, but he can't play a poor game.
He can't.
And the Texas game, he threaded some balls in there, but they weren't great decisions. They were great throws.
Right, or it worked out.
They worked out.
He threw it past the G. Scott down the middle. That was like, what is he doing?
Forced it in, but again, if he throws a pick like deep in territory, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but he's thrown a pick in 4 of the last 5 games.
They've played 6 ranked teams this year. In those 6 games, he's thrown 4 interceptions and he's fumbled, which was he lost a fumble at Penn State.
Yeah,
so that is a big factor because and not even kind of the Michigan game where he had the two picks. So
against a team that plays press man-to-man, you're less likely to throw interceptions. You mostly get interceptions against zone defense when they can read you.
That's true.
And so the corners' backs are toward the quarterback in man-pressed coverage most of the time.
Then it gets into being able to complete the deep ball a little bit.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Maybe. Or the slant, the slant over the middle and let Jeremiah Smith or Nakabuka or whoever catch it and make plays in space. So, I guess I contradict my own little statement and I say Notre Dame's had a lot of interceptions. So I guess they figured out a way to do it from man coverage. But generally speaking, it's easier to get interceptions out of zone coverage as quarterback throws in the coverage.
They have good guys in their secondary.
Even though they lost Benjamin Morris and their top cornerback to an injury.
Well, Ohio State has to feel fortunate because, forget Michigan, go back farther. We've talked about this Oregon game, hearing when Josh Simmons goes down, and I heard a member of the media who will remain unnamed.
Might be me.
No, it wasn't you. Said there goes the national championship. That's how big a loss that seemed at the time because the O-line wasn't great to begin with. It was going to be the
getting there.
It was going to be the weak point. Well, but they hadn't played anybody.
Right.
They had not played.
The Iowa game was a good step forward with the way they could run the ball.
Yeah.
And they were moving the ball well on Josh Simmons' left side. And he's a first-round NFL draft.
Right, but then he goes down.
Right.
And it's like, oh, boy, there are going to be problems against Georgia or whoever it may be.
Right,
I don't think Notre Dame was mentioned back then. And then when Seth McLaughlin goes down, it's like, well, this is
sky falling.
Catastrophic.
How are they going to do this?
I said that. I thought it was over. I thought their national championships hopes were over when McLaughlin went out. I thought 1, they can withstand, 2, they can't. But they've proven me and others wrong. I just wrote a story that today on that. We'll see. The last test is the biggest, but so far it's held up.
They've had a lot of guys, and I think Justin Fry deserves credit for getting some of these guys like Luke Montgomery to be able to fill in.
9 starters on the offensive line.
It makes you wonder what did they see in these guys earlier. It's classic.
The starting 5. I think Tegra Shabola has been at right guard, has not been great. He did great as a champion last week against Texas.
Who did?
Shabola.
Fryer. What about?
Fryer is one of the.
I will say Fryer deserves credit because he's playing on one foot at this point in the season.
Listen, I'm not judging that. I'm just saying even when he was super healthy.
Oh, you're right.
Solid.
Yes.
Well, of course. Look, he's
playing at Ohio State. You're not going to be
it's funny in their championship teams. Their right tackle, the 2014 team, Darryl Baldwin was clearly the least talented of the offensive line on that team. I mean, everyone else on that 14 team, Taylor Decker, Pat Elflein, Billy Price, who's Jacoby Boren. Boren was a very good college center, but he was too small to be in the pros, but he was a very good college center. Darryl Baldwin was kind of the guy, okay, we needed a right tackle. He's the best we got, and he's serviceable. I think Fryer's a step above serviceable. But, is he a star? No, he's not a star. But he's a gutty leader. And I tell you, I think he's a very good leader for that unit. He's an emotional leader for that unit. And Donovan Jackson, as we talked about, I think might be the most invaluable player they've had because there's no alternative to him at left tackle. I don't know who they would play. George Fitzpatrick is now
Zen Mahalski.
Zen Mahalski was in the portal too.
Yeah.
Was hurt. I mean, they tried Mahalski the one game. It didn't go well.
Yeah.
And boy, I mean, they'd be up a creek without Donovan Jackson.
Right. So
They're lucky he came back.
And well, this was an interesting little tidbit. We were talking to Jack Sawyer yesterday, Joe and I, and Sawyer had said a couple of days earlier, there was a player, one of those seniors, who was on the fence and leaning toward going pro. I won't say who he was, but, thank God he came back. Well, yesterday he says, Donovan Jackson was going to be – he just named him.
Oh, yeah. He said Players Tribune that, right?
Yeah, right. It was
and then he said it again, right.
Okay.
But Donovan Jackson had decided to go pro and then changed his mind. And you think about a pivotal decision. In hindsight, that's a pivotal decision.
Right.
Now, maybe they'd have gone in the portal and gotten somebody else. Who knows? Yeah. But Donovan Jackson is a 2-time, not 3-time, All Big Ten.
All-American this year, too.
All-American. I mean, you look at the collection of talent on this team. I mean, I talked to Urban Meyer this week after he got inducted to the Hall of Fame, and we talked about this game. He said, I don't know that I've ever seen a more talented team. He said every skill position player on this team is going to be an impactful NFL starter. Is G. Scott? We'll see about that. But you look at Jeremiah, absolutely. Jeremiah would be the first pick of the draft this year. He'd be the first pick. Caleb Downs would be a top 5 pick, I bet you.
Nathan Ransom's helped his college.
Travion Henderson, is now probably a second round pick. The last mock I saw was a second round pick. You look, Donovan Jackson's going to be a high pick. We did this before, but they're not going to have anybody probably in the top 10. But they're going to have a flood of guys between then and like the fourth round.
It's such a. I mean, if they finish the deal and beat Notre Dame. It's the fact that they've had these guys together for so many years. 17 out of the 22 starters are juniors or seniors. Yeah. It's such a veteran-laden team. Jordan Hancock called it like an AAU basketball team that's been playing together for a bunch of years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what you need typically.
And that's very rare these days with the NFL, and that's where the NIL money comes in to keep these players here. And it's not so much about getting
they weren't necessarily quite good enough to get the NFL draft grade they wanted.
Right.
It was the sweet spot of a confluence of factors. The fact that they weren't all going to be surefire first round picks. That dissuaded them from leaving. They had incentive to stay and hardware to try to win. And then you add an NIL component, which gives them much better financial security than if they were making this decision 5 years ago.
And I think they like each other. I think
they do.
It's a close team. I'm not going to go out there and say that's the most important thing or not. I mean, NIL money, all these things. I think it's all these things together. And I'm not sure one is like so much more than the other. Maybe NIL is, depending on the money. I don't know. But you put all that together, and they came back, and they needed it to happen.
You're not going to find, I don't think, very often a team like this that's got this amount of veteran talent. Multi-year starters on a team. I just don't think that's going to happen very often.
And some of this is due to the after effects of the 2020 pandemic season because Cody Simon, Lathan Ramson, both those guys are in their extra year of eligibility. Will Howard is as well.
Is Fryer? Fryer's a 5th year.
Fryer is a 5th year guy, but I don't.
Isn't Notre Dame pretty veteran heavy?
Riley Leonard's played a lot of ball.
Yeah.
So they are in some spots. They have a linebackers in his 7th year.
So
he might. No comment.
But I mean, and you factor in the veterans and
Jack Kaiser,
and then you add in Jeremiah Smith, freshman, and Caleb Downs, sophomore.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Caleb Downs, I'm too young for Jack Tatum, and they're obviously different kind of players. But you think about impactful safeties. I mean, Jack Tatum
was a hitter.
I know.
Yeah.
Different player.
Different time, different era.
Of course.
There was no targeting.
There was no targeting. I mean, Jack Tatum would not have, playing the way he played, wouldn't have made it.
Right.
He'd been disqualified from every game he played. But in terms of impact, I mean, Caleb Downs is a student of the game. He's blessed with amazing ability. He's just probably I would bet that NFL analysts would say he's as close to a perfect prospect as there is. I don't know that there's a weakness in his game.
I don't know about his size. He's not
that
really big. He's not like a.
He's not unusually big.
He's not like a 6'2", 220 safety. Feels like he's not that.
But he is.
But he's fast.
Fast. I mean, he's instinctive.
Yeah.
Because he studies the game so well, so he combines it. So anyway, you have that element. You have the Jeremiah Smith element. The fact that both running backs are fresh as much as they can be this time of year is impressive. I mean, the play that Travion Henderson made on the screen pass, there aren't many people who would just find that little seam and gone. And
credit where due, again, Will Howard. We didn't really know. I mean, it was like, okay, this guy comes in, a Kansas State caretaker, game manager. You know, is he better than McCord? You know, and I think that's kind of a toss-up. I think I gave the edge to Howard for leadership, for running ability. But he's been what they've needed.
Right.
And, I've nitpicked him all season because of some of this stuff. The deep ball, the not looking off receivers, both of which he's improved at. But he could have been a bit of a bust, and then they would have been in trouble.
No doubt. He's been exactly what they needed. I mean, again, he's not been perfect. Nobody's perfect. But and he has a presence about him. He's a happy guy, and he's the kind of guy that I understand why teammates want to be around him. And you need that from a quarterback. They could be different ways. I mean, I think about Ohio State's quarterbacks over the years. You know, JT was a natural leader that JT Barrett was a natural leader that guys wanted to play. Cardale, in his way, was, outgoing personality. People gravitate toward him. We don't really get to know Justin Fields that well, but I think behind closed doors, he was kind of like that. And I think Will Howard is definitely like that.
I want to mention one other guy because I think he's flown somewhat under the radar this year. Not much, but Emeka Egbuka. This guy is he going to finish as the all-time leading receiver?
He's got a chance. I don't have that.
But Jeremiah Smith has been like it's like
supernova.
It's like the
dwarfs everything else.
Right. It's like the eclipse. Right. It's like,
but when you need
it's not like he's been ignored, Emeka.
No, but when it's 3rd and 6, who do you look for?
Emeka. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, he's the guy. If there's no Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka is talked about like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett, Wilson, all these guys. He goes down as one of the all-timers.
I still think he might. But it's a credit to him that he has not seen the least bit bothered by it.
Exactly. Well, he knows his NFL future is pretty secure, I think. Yeah. But it's like there's no question he's been in the shadow of Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah. And before that, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
No, if you were to rank the most indispensable offensive players, I would say it's honestly Donovan Jackson, number 1. I would probably say Emeka, number 2, or Jeremiah.
We're not including quarterback.
Well, yeah, I guess quarterback, just by the nature of the position, is always number 1.
Right.
If you don't have a quarterback, you've got nothing.
Right.
So if you exclude the quarterback, I would say Donovan Jackson. I would say Emeka / Jeremiah. You might laugh at this. I might say Carson Hinzman, just because, again, they needed a center. And after a disappointing year last year, he's stepped up. But yeah, I think that Trayvon's talent he's averaging, is it like 7.3 yards a carry?
And yet he still isn't starting. He didn't start against Texas. And that's he's coming off. Right. He's like the
7.3 yards a carry, I think. And that's not counting the 75 yards.
That is a record for Ohio State, I believe. I think I think 6.5 or something is maybe the highest.
Yeah, 7 points. Now he's not had a ton of carries. That's part of the process. That's part of the deal.
Right.
But and that's not factoring in the pass catching. The 75-yard screen pass doesn't count. And that really was in some ways more of a run than a pass. But But he has been. It's amazing for a guy in his senior year to be a revelation. But he's been hurt so much, and people were down on him because of the durability issue.
Right.
And he's been phenomenal.
He's been healthy. And I would have not taken that bet that he'd have gotten through the season.
Again, that's where the Sherry the load. Mm-hmm. That system Sherry with Quinshad Judkins has been perfect for both players.
Yeah, and they can use that moving forward. They can use this as a blueprint. Like if there's a guy out there and I want to be the guy, well, do you want to play in the NFL? Well, that's what I really want to do. Well, then look at this. These guys are less tread.
Right.
Or more tread on the tire. They both got their accolades.
They got the kid from West Virginia in the portal, and they'll have James Peoples next year. And so that could be their system next year. Those two guys are the guy. next year's team will fasting. We'll talk about that obviously.
What's your picks?
I like Ohio State by 2 scores. I just think they're better. 31-21. I think it might be even more like 31-17. I just think they're.
That was my pick, 31-17.
I saw everyone pick 31, so I had 31, and I said I changed it. So I think I might have had 34.
I think it might be less.
35?
I would go down on that more than up. After listening to all the talk this week, I'm thinking maybe they had 28 against Texas, and they needed the 30, and they needed 2 huge plays to get it.
Right.
So, are they going to get those huge plays? Well, in a different way, maybe. Maybe they get a Jeremiah.
Maybe they don't have the massive penalties that they had.
Maybe they don't. Maybe they turn the ball over. I think it'll even out. Anyhow, we all have them as 2.
I think they're. Right? Yeah, I forget what it was 31. 30, I don't know what I had, honestly.
I mean, they seem like a team on a mission at this point, and they're clicking and playing well. And
this is from our perspective. I think you talk to Notre Dame people.
They feel the same way.
They feel like they're on a mission, especially after losing to Northern Illinois. They feel like
Notre Dame itself. But I think people who look at both teams objectively and kind of dispassionately realize that Ohio State's a more complete team because they have the passing game.
And they're being picked by most everyone.
I don't know. I haven't looked for this stuff, but I'd be surprised if anybody picks Notre Dame.
Yeah, to me,
I'm not saying they can't win. I'm just saying I'll be surprised.
Both of these teams have beaten good teams to get here. I mean, Ohio State beat the 1 seed, Notre Dame beat the 2 seed. Right. Probably those teams, Oregon, Texas, and Georgia, were the 3 other best teams in the field. Ohio State beat 2 of them. Notre Dame beat 1 of them, and Georgia
beat Penn State.
I guess I'd put Texas above Penn State.
I'm just saying Penn State was nothing.
Yeah,
compared to maybe. Well, I was going to say Arizona State, but Arizona State, came on pretty strong against Texas. So I think they were all good teams. Indiana, maybe, And
look, Ohio State, of all the teams they could play in a final, you think about. These juggernauts that have made the finals. That's not Notre Dame. They're a very solid team, but they're not a team that scares you the way that
they have 1 5-star in the roster.
Yeah, I mean that in the end that might be the difference.
Yeah, talent trumps.
Jimmy's and Joe's, as they say, beats X's nose.
Yeah,
and Ohio State just has. If you were to have an NFL draft, if you have a draft of these teams, how many of the top 22 would be Ohio State players? I'd probably say at least 15.
So what's it come down to? It comes down to don't beat yourself,
right?
And coaching.
And
coaching. You cannot have a Michigan coach. You can't have a Michigan coaching game. And
I would say the head of Ryan Day in this game will be huge because if he just leans on the playmakers. They push tempo. They should beat Notre Dame. But if it turns into a case where we're gonna run it, we're gonna show them our toughness. I'm gonna prove Lou Holtz right or wrong, I should say. You end up proving Lou Holtz right.
Yeah.
So how much is Lou in their head?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, he was certainly in their head last time.
Yeah.
Well, they did win for what it's worth.
Right.
Barely.
Yeah. Anyhow, That's it. Finish line in sight.
Well, thank you.
I would say it is
for listening all season.
It is funny that they are playing these 2 teams. They barely played. They have the home and home 2 years ago, and now it's the 3rd game. They've played only a handful of times in school history.
Neutral site
in Atlanta, down in the deep South. 2 Midwestern teams.
Yep, first time ever.
Showing that Northern football is superior.
This, by the way, would be the first time since the 1960s if Ohio State wins that the Big Ten's gone back-to-back national had repeat champions.
There you go.
And Ohio State and Michigan have never won the national title in consecutive seasons.
Which driving Michigan is crazy right now. But they always have. I don't want to end on this note, but they always have but you couldn't beat us.
Oh well, that's right.
They will.
They are working that one hard.
They play that card every chance they get.
Playing that card.
And look, why not?
You could make the case that if Ohio State wins Monday night, that the rivalry could be at an all-time high because they would be the 2 last national champions. You have the cheating scandal with the Stallions thing. Tensions are high, an all-time upset. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff brewing in that cauldron.
Right.
Think about how horrible Ohio State thought a year ago when Michigan won the title. I mean, they were the absolute low point. Kyle McCord had gone into the portal. Ohio State lays an egg of a game in the Cotton Bowl. They didn't have a quarterback at that point. And then, what actually the moment where it kind of started to turn was right after that game when Quinshon Judkins said, "I'm coming to Ohio State." I mean, literally right as that game ended. And so Ohio State fans went from complete despair to all hope's not lost. All hope's not lost. And now here we are 12 months later, and they're on the precipice of a championship. But again, as they've said all week, got to finish it.
Right.
Yeah. And
there's nothing to talk about.
We're done. We're done.
If they lose. In terms of legacy, I mean,
none.
The Jack Sawyer is a big play. It's a Jim Laughlin block punt from 70. It's a nice play. It's a big play, but it meant nothing.
I talked to James Laurinaitis for a story on his relationship with Marcus Freeman, and he said he's told the players, look, he played on two national championship or finalist teams, lost 2006 and 2007. He said nobody walks through the halls talking about runners up, the halls of the Woody.
Right.
And so they've made that very clear. This is your legacy. This game will determine whether you are just another one who came close or one of the few that finished the deal.
Right.
And I'm reminded about this, the only one, at least in modern history, of a team that entered the season as a prime contender that actually did it. Every other one's kind of come out of the blue. So that's what's at stake tomorrow.
Yeah, and individual awards too. Troy Smith wins the Heisman, lays an egg in the national title game. He would go down as probably the greatest quarterback in Ohio State history. But if you win the Heisman and you win a national title, but he couldn't finish the deal.
Right.
And so he's probably not.
Could be Will Howard.
Well, Craig Krenzel won it. So, but anyhow, thanks for listening. All season.
Also, all season long, you'll hear from us after the game, breaking down whatever happens at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta on Monday night. As Rob said, thanks for joining us along for the ride as the Buckeyes make it to the final. And I hope you all enjoy the game. Thanks for listening.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.